This is not an easy schedule for USC, but we're going to know if it's real when they go to Michigan on September 21st. College football has never been better. Interest has never been higher. I believe that we are at the dawn of the golden age of college football. It was an epic day of college football. It was one of those days where you fall in love with the sport all over again. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into the program. I'm Joel Klatt. This is the Joel Klatt Show, and we are presented by Hampton by Hilton. Remember, wherever you're listening, wherever you get your podcast, make sure to rate and review us. Please give us a rating, review us, share it with a friend. That would be awesome. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe and definitely send it to a friend. Just share it. Just hit the little share and send it to a friend and be like, hey, this is awesome. You should watch this as well. And you should probably subscribe as well because everybody loves to talk college football with their friends. So do all that for the Joel Klatt Show. Follow us at Joel Klatt Show wherever you like to social media. You can follow me at Joel Klatt on Twitter. We got all of that out of the way quickly because we got a big show for you here on a Wednesday, getting ready for week 3 of the college football season. A lot has gone on, and it's starting to become a little bit more clear what teams are after a couple of weeks, and then that'll just continue after week 3 and week 4 and so on and so forth. So what I wanted to do today is take a bunch of teams that I haven't really dug into and talk about them a little bit. And we're going to do this in this framework. What I thought before the season, what I think now, and when will we know for sure? Okay, so I've got 3 teams specifically that I want to take through that kind of process, that car wash. What I thought at the beginning of the season, what I think now, and when will we know for sure? Okay, so 3-step process. Here we go. 3 teams that really have impressed me over the first couple of weeks of the season. All 3 are in my top 7, not top 7 in the AP, but that's generally because the AP poll sucks. That was that one came out that you got a little of sassy Joel there. That just flew out. Hey, it's a Wednesday. Let's go. Let's get after it. I'm going to start with the team that has impressed me the most, even though their singular win maybe wasn't as impressive as the next 2 teams, but this team I'm high on. I like what I see from this team, and that's Tennessee. So the question coming into the season, and what I thought coming into the season was, hey, what is this young QB going to be? Nico Iamaleava. I believe that's Iamaleava. I'm going to say it as many times as possible so that it can just get embedded into my head so that I don't have to sing the dumb "We Didn't Start the Fire" song in my head in order to pronounce the name, because that's the song that's in my head when I try to say Nico's name. We didn't start the fire. Iamaleava. Thank you, Kat, our resident Tennessee volunteer on the show. She put that song in my head, and now I can pronounce the name, but I've got the song stuck in my head. So my question was about Nico Iamaleava. All right. And guess what? Everywhere else, I didn't have a ton of questions. I like Josh Heupel as a coach. I thought their defense would be pretty good. And to me, it was all about quarterback. Would you get Hendon Hooker style play or not? Because when they had a really good quarterback a couple of years ago, they were one of the better teams in all of college football, carried the goalposts right down into the river after beating Alabama. And so the question for me was about Nico Iamaleava. I know that he threw a couple of picks against North Carolina State, but this kid looks legit. All the hype surrounding everything that we know about his NIL and recruitment and all that, it at times was a bit of a sideshow, but this guy is a really good player. Almost 75% completion percentage, 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions on the season, and they are explosive. So they are now more along the lines of the 2022 version of Tennessee, like I said a couple of weeks ago, the Hendon Hooker version of Tennessee, which means that this team is, at least I think right now, one of the better teams in the SEC. So what I thought at the beginning of the season was it was a wait and see because of the quarterback. Now he's been electric in the better part of 2 games. And so when will we know for sure? Well, we're going to know for sure when we start looking at their schedule, and they've got at Oklahoma, at Arkansas, Alabama, and at Georgia. That's September 21st, October 5th, October 19th, and November 16th. I think that the date is September 21st at Oklahoma. That's the date that we're going to know for sure. These are their toughest remaining games, at least in my estimation. And we're going to know if Tennessee is as good as I think they are right now on September 21st against OU. If they play well in that game, then I don't think an SEC championship game and a playoff appearance is out of the question. I don't think that that's out of the question. Remember, it's just a different framework with how we're doing this. They don't have to win the East, so they don't have to be better than Georgia in order to go to the SEC championship game. They don't even have to beat Georgia. Remember, Georgia has to play at Texas. If Georgia loses that game and they've got one loss, now all of a sudden it takes one other loss in what is a ridiculously difficult schedule for Georgia. And Tennessee, even if they lose to the Bulldogs, could win the remaining games that they have and go to the SEC championship game. So we're going to know that on September 21st. Now, if they go to Oklahoma and struggle, then, I'm going to punt on that kind of prediction and expectation. But their front seven is really strong. James Pierce is an excellent player. They held North Carolina State to 143 total yards, and they had 3 takeaways, 1 pick six. I'm in on Tennessee right now. I think that they're a very good football team. We're going to know for sure on September 21st against Oklahoma. That's next week. Heupel's return to Oklahoma. He's going to be all jacked up. You know that. Those of you that don't know the backstory there, Josh Heupel obviously won a national championship as the quarterback for the Sooners and Bob Stoops in the year 2000. That was a really magical year for the Sooners. He was a magical figure on that team, and he was excellent. And that team, even though they were fairly defensive-led, they were really good on offense, and Heupel was an excellent player. Then he became an offensive coordinator and offensive coach under Bob Stoops for years. And in fact, when Stoops was needing to change things up, he let Heupel go and brought in Lincoln Riley, and that's how Lincoln Riley became the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma. So Josh Heupel, who's won a national championship in an Oklahoma uniform, was actually not dismissed, but kind of like let go from the coaching staff, and Lincoln Riley was brought in. So there's going to be so many emotions, not just from his playing days, but also from his coaching days at Oklahoma. So there's going to be all sorts of backstories there when Tennessee goes on the road to face Oklahoma in Norman, and that Oklahoma team is pretty good. Nico can run it. He can throw it. I'm in on Tennessee. Okay, let's move to Miami. Hello, Miami. And this is a team I was very high on in the preseason. So what did I think in the preseason? I thought in the preseason that Miami was going to be the ACC favorite and that they had the best quarterback in the ACC. I said it on the preview episodes. In fact, I put them in my playoff. You can go back and listen to the episode. You can look at the graphics over on social media. I have Miami in my playoff at the very beginning of the season. I thought Cam Ward was going to be the best quarterback in the ACC. The question was like, how much of a difference was he going to be able to make on what we would assume was just an incredibly improved roster over the last couple of years with Mario Cristobal's recruiting, his NIL, everything that they've done in the transfer portal. And what do I think now? Well, Cam Ward has not only been the best player in the ACC, but one of the best players in the country. And so I have him in my early Heisman top 5. Stay tuned. I've got my Heisman top 5 coming up at the end of the show, so you're going to want to stay tuned for that. They also added at Miami Damian Martinez. Guess what he's done? 6 yards per carry. If you remember in those preview episodes, I said, watch out for Damian Martinez. This guy is one of the most underrated quality transfers of the entire portal season last year, and that's come to fruition. So Miami is all of a sudden this team that I thought was going to be very good because their quarterback was going to be spectacular. That's exactly what has happened, and maybe he's even better than we all thought, and these other pieces have been very good. Restrepo had 100 yards in each of his first two games at wide receiver. Cristobal has been strengthening the offensive and defensive lines through a few years of quality recruitment. So all of that stuff is paying dividends now for Miami. And Miami, what do I think now? They're still the ACC favorite. I don't see another team in the ACC that can beat them. However, I will be talking about Clemson in a moment. And Clemson all of a sudden is kind of like, I don't know what to think about Clemson, especially after their outburst of points in the first half against App State. More on that in a little bit. So the question becomes like, that's what I thought. It seems to be confirmed, in particular with that big win over Florida and the way that they've played, the way that he looked, throwing the football around the field. But when will we know for sure? Well, that's going to be a little bit more difficult because you look at this schedule and you think to yourself, like, there's not a lot left. There's only one ranked team left on the schedule. That's Louisville right now, and that's a road game. So maybe it's that game. Or is it Virginia Tech? Is it Cal? Going to Cal. Cal just beat Auburn. You know what? I don't think it's any of those. For Miami, I'm going to know if it's real again for Miami. I'm going to know against Florida State. And I get it. Florida State's 0-2. They have not looked good. But this is still, based on the reports out there from this week, a $12 million roster. This is still a team that was undefeated a year ago. And more specifically, and more importantly, this is their rival. You know Florida State is going to be all geeked up in order to play Miami. You see, I don't think Miami has to be perfect to go to the ACC championship game. But I'm going to know that it's real if they can line up and take care of their rival, Florida State. So that's the date I'm looking at, October 26th. That Saturday against the Noles. Is it real for Miami? We're going to know on October 26th. Third team I want to talk about, also in my top 7, also been very impressive thus far, USC. USC has been incredibly impressive. Now, coming into the season, I was high on USC. Both Miami and USC, I would say I was higher than most, at least of kind of the pundits in the preseason. I wasn't on Tennessee because I didn't know, but now I'm starting to really believe in Tennessee. But USC, I had this sneaky suspicion that they were going to turn it around. And for me, it wasn't about their quarterback. So if I take you through, like, what did I think in the offseason and what do I think now? It's all stemming from their defense. But to be fair, most people also had questions about Miller Moss. Now, maybe it was just the familiarity that I had having done the bowl game against Louisville in what became his only start last year, and watching him in that game, I immediately thought to myself, that looked like vintage Oklahoma Lincoln Riley offense. This guy looks totally under control. He's very accurate. I'm not saying that he's going to play great every single week, but man, he looks like a guy that can go out there and operate what is a very potent system incredibly well. So Miller wasn't the question for me. So what did I think in the preseason? Well, I was wondering, like everybody, about the defense. D'Anton Lynn, was he really going to be able to fix a defense that seemed last year unfixable? Last year's defense was awful. I mean, you look down, I tried to go in and I was like, what were they worst at? You know, like, what are the metrics that I could share during this show that is like, oh man, look at their drastic improvement in this specific area. And then you start going through the statistical categories and you start realizing, like, they were really bad at everything. They just were. Like, there was no specificity to how bad they were. It was all bad. And now they're playing much better. So my question before the season was, is the defense going to be even average? Can they improve? Is the defense going to pull their own weight? That was my question. It was not about Miller Moss. I trusted Lincoln Riley and his quarterback philosophy, and it was about the defense. 121st in scoring defense last year, 119th in total yards. D'Anton Lynn's group, they held LSU to 20 points and pitched a shutout in week 2. Granted, it's Utah State, but that's what you should do. If you go back to some of these games that they played against what I would consider like not great opponents, they were giving up 21, 24, 28 points in previous years. In fact, just look at what they did a year ago. They gave up at least 28 points in 11 of their 13 games. They could have lost their last 7 regular season games last year. They beat Arizona in a 3-overtime thriller in which Caleb kind of went total Superman. And then they beat Cal 50-49 because Cal failed on a 2-point conversion at the end of, well, basically the end of the game in the final minute. That was their last 2 wins of the season before the Holiday Bowl. A 3-overtime like shootout and a 50-49 game. Like the defense wasn't anywhere close. Now, I think that they're actually not just average, they're pretty good. That's the scary part, is that I've always said, can you imagine what Lincoln Riley's team would be with just requisite defense or just better defense, and better meaning like just average defense? Well, this team seems to be playing better than average defense. So now all of a sudden, like, this team that I was kind of high on before the year, I'm even ratcheting that up a little bit. I've seen them obviously on film, and if they can go and beat Michigan, that's when I'm going to know that it's real. So that's what I thought before the season. That's what I think now. And when are we going to really know? Next week, September 21st at number 17, Michigan, because of the way that Michigan looked against Texas. Okay. Now, Texas might just be one of the best teams in the country. And in fact, I think that they are. But USC's got to be thinking to themselves, like, this is when you would want to face Michigan. You didn't want to face them anytime in the last 3 years, in particular last year, and you don't want to face them late in the season once they can develop their offensive line and really get it rolling with some of that physical play. This is not an easy schedule for USC, but we're going to know if it's real when they go to Michigan on September 21st. Now, they still are going to have to face Wisconsin and Penn State and Washington and Nebraska, which all of a sudden looks like a much tougher game, and Notre Dame, which now looks like an easier game than it did when they beat A&M, but you get my point. It's not an easy schedule, but if they can take care of LSU and Michigan, it looks manageable. And you see a path to 10-2, and 10-2 USC in that schedule with a win over LSU and potentially a win over Michigan in the Big House, you would absolutely expect that team to go to the playoff. So that's what I think now, and we're going to know if it's real September 21st. Because if they get beat by that Michigan team that didn't look great offensively and Texas kind of handled, then we're going to be thinking to ourselves like, all right, it's kind of the same USC, and we'll see. And they've played down to their level of competition at times, and they weren't consistent at times during the course of the last couple of years. But we'll know September 21st. I have a hunch it could be really good for USC. Those three teams I've been incredibly impressed with. Tennessee, Miami, and USC. I've been incredibly impressed with them. And we're going to know in those weeks what those teams are for the long haul. All right, time for the weekend check-in, sponsored by Hampton by Hilton. When your team needs you at your best, it matters where you stay. Hilton for the stay. The weekend check-in, let's check in on some teams with some very different Saturdays from a week ago. Okay, so I've got three teams that I'd like to check in with. Fan base check-in starts with the Clemson Tigers. Told you I'd touch on them. Clemson fans have got to be thinking to themselves like, what? Because to be honest, I'm scrolling around, I'm watching games in the plane, I'm getting updates on my phone on Saturday, and in my mind, I'm like, this can't be right. Like, there's a glitch, right? You mean to tell me that the team that did nothing offensively against Georgia is just smoking App State? Like, smoking App State. 3 points and 188 total yards against Georgia. That's it. Now, maybe you could say, well, Joel, Georgia's elite. Fine. Fair enough. App State was receiving votes, which means that they're one of the, best 30, 31, 32, 33 teams in the country? 66 points, 712 yards against App State. That's unreal. So which one is it? Clemson fans, let's check in. Which one is it? And you know what? Cautiously, I'm optimistic because for the first time since last year, I can honestly say this is kind of what I wanted to start to see last season when Garrett Riley became your offensive coordinator. If you want to go all the way back, and I remember this because in hindsight, it was probably the prediction that I was most off on before last season in 2023 was this idea that Garrett Riley coming from TCU after that national championship run with Max Duggan and going to Clemson, he was going to improve Cade Klubnik and the offense, which had become very stagnant at Clemson. That was the thought. And I thought to myself, you know what? I trust it. I think that Garrett's really good, and I think Cade is talented, and I think that this is going to work. And I thought, you know what? Clemson's going to win the ACC. And then it didn't happen. It didn't happen at all. Maybe I was just a year early. Maybe we're just starting to see this come to fruition. Klubnik was 24 of 26 on Saturday for 378 yards, 5 touchdowns against App State, and he's the National Player of the Week. This is what I thought 15 games ago. Maybe it just took 15 games in order for them to develop and really learn the system. The opening schedule doesn't look so bad now that NC State in a couple of weeks and Florida State in 4 weeks don't look that great. Should they be favorite in the ACC? Probably not because of the way that Miami looks, but this is their toughest remaining games. NC State, Florida State, Louisville, Virginia Tech, Pitt, South Carolina. All of a sudden, it doesn't look so bad. It doesn't look so bad. And the fan base, I would frame as we check in here, I would frame this as maybe this is a moment where Klubnik and Garrett Riley and the offense start to turn the corner. Okay, you don't have to face Georgia every week. And in fact, you can get better. And you know what? Maybe down the road, you're going to get another chance at Georgia. And maybe down the road, you're going to get a chance at Miami in the ACC championship game. But we wrote Clemson off because of the fashion in which they lost to Georgia. And I'm here to reel you back in and say, hey, let's check in here because Clemson, maybe you're starting to turn the corner here offensively. Maybe that was a sign of things to come. App State is no slouch. Maybe one of the top 33 teams in the country. And they absolutely hammered them. It wasn't even close. I believe they scored their 42nd point at the 12-minute mark of the second quarter. It was wild. Next fan base we need to check in with. How about the Buckeyes? The Ohio State Buckeyes. Hey, Buckeye fans, how you feeling about this new squad, this new talented roster, this new play caller, and Chip Kelly? Ohio State has outscored their opponents 108-6 through two games, and they have yet to allow a touchdown. You might be thinking to yourself, Joel, they haven't played anybody. That's fine. That's fine. And you know what? They did exactly what they should do to those teams. Guess who would take that right now? Notre Dame, Oregon, any of those teams, right? What I'm looking at is this check-in on Chip Kelly. I'm starting to see this Chip Kelly effect. 273 rush yards and 6 touchdowns last week. That was a Western Michigan team, by the way, that led Wisconsin in the fourth quarter in week 1. So maybe they weren't nobody. Again, 273 rush yards. We have not seen that over the last few years. And in fact, I think that's been the one thing that's been hindering Ohio State more than anything is their inability to really control the game at the line of scrimmage. So now you've got Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. They're averaging 147 yards on over 7 yards per carry as a duo. So as we check in on Ohio State, you can say they haven't played anybody, but I'm checking in on Chip Kelly. I'm checking in on that run game. And all of a sudden, that looks extremely dangerous. Ohio State looks extremely dangerous. I understand that they have not had a marquee opponent like Georgia has had with Clemson, like Texas has had with Michigan to really showcase how good they are. I'm here to tell you, I think Ohio State is exactly who we thought they were. If we're checking in on Ohio State 2 weeks in, they are an elite team and a scary team. If that run game is reliable and the defense is as good as we think it was going to be, which it's proving that out on the field, it's going to be a really, really hard team to beat, a really hard team. So if I'm a fan of Ohio State, I feel great right now because what I hoped to see in the first 2 games, even against subpar opponents, I'm seeing. It's a great check-in right there, Ohio State fans. Next check-in. How we doing, Oregon? How we doing? Duck fans, how you feeling? How we feeling in Eugene? For the second straight week, Oregon escapes. Unconvincing win. Now a win, but unconvincing. Now this time, let's be fair, it's a walk-off win, but Boise. Boise's 3-0 against Oregon. They've got Ashton Jeanty. Won't be the last time I say his name in this show. They needed 2 special teams TDs to do this. One return was almost a huge blunder as they almost dropped the ball and really probably did drop the ball before the end zone. Jeanty ran all over him. I mean, Jeanty was phenomenal, and I thought that Oregon would be better at the line of scrimmage, both offensively and defensively. The offensive line clearly has not gelled, trying to break in 2 new starters. We see them now giving up sacks at a rate that is frankly alarming as compared to last year. They've already given up more sacks in 2 games than they did all of last season. And those two opponents are Idaho and Boise State. So they haven't even gotten into the Big Ten schedule. Remember, they're going to have to face Ohio State. Granted, that game is at home, but they're going to have to see Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, and they have problems in protection. If I'm checking in on the fan base of Oregon, I'm worried. I think that there is some real concern for Oregon because these are not fluky issues. When you have leaky protection, that persists. All of a sudden, you don't become great in pass protection. That is something that is a standard held prior to the season. It's not developed. It's not like physical nature in the run game that you can develop a solid run game. Can you get a little better in pass protection? Yes, but generally it's can you or can't you? That's the way that I've always felt. Big plays have absolutely saved the Ducks. 2 long pass TDs, 2 special teams returns. Boise outgamed them in that game last week, and they still won. 4 more sacks, man. 7 sacks. That's more than all of last year. And Jeanty, 192 yards. So Dan Lanning sums it up perfectly. If I'm checking in on the fan base, I just have to quote Dan Lanning. I have a sense of relief because of the result, but there are certainly a lot of things to fix. That's the mild version. The less mild version is it's borderline panic based on the expectations in the preseason in Eugene. Remember, everything has to be through the prism of expectation. That's why these teams that have played better than we expect, we're so excited about. That's why teams like Oregon that have played much worse than we expect, we're much more worried about. We're worried about Michigan. We're worried about Oregon. There's concern for both of those teams. They've got to fix some of those issues before they head into a Big Ten slate, or else this is not going to be the year that everyone thought it was going to be in Eugene. So things to fix there for Dan Lanning, a guy that I'm very high on, a roster that I'm very high on. I thought this team was going to be excellent. I thought they would bounce back and really play well against Boise State. And candidly, they didn't. They probably should have lost that game. Boise, in many respects, was the better team. That's the alarming part. That's why there's deep concern as we're checking in with the Ducks fan base. Okay, let's move on. It's been only 2 games, but I think there's been enough quality performances from individuals to start giving hey, let's give a soft top 5 for the Heisman. What do we think? Let's give a soft top 5 for the Heisman right here. Let's get going right now. Let's go 5-1, and we start with number 5, even though he hasn't had to be great and won't need to be great for a while. Can't wait for his matchup against Texas. Carson Beck from Georgia. It's a nice and easy start for Carson, averaging 9 yards per attempt, and has 7 touchdowns, no interceptions. So he's on the list in the preseason. He's done nothing to take himself off the list, so he's easily right there at number 5. Hasn't really had the moment, had the stage in order to do anything more than that. At number 4, I've got Miller Moss at USC. You talk about big-time throws and at times willing your team down the field against LSU. I thought he was so good. He was terrific in that game. Now, last week against Utah State, he made a lot of the same throws. It just wasn't the pressure-packed environment that it was against LSU. This offense is going to be just fine. I predicted that in the preseason. They are just fine, in large part due to the fact that this guy can play. And Miller Moss, with his performance against LSU and that offense and knowing what I know about that offense, he's not going to go anywhere. Lincoln Riley's players are always right there. Number 3, as we see, is Ashton Jeanty, the running back from Boise. This dude has been awesome. Preseason All-American. He's totally delivered, including against what we thought was a top 4 team coming into the season. He leads the country in every rushing category. 229 rush yards per game on 10 yards per carry. Folks, 10. Count them, 10. 9 touchdowns in just 2 games. Granted, Georgia Southern, but a top 10 Oregon team on the road. He has 3 70-yard touchdowns this year. This guy is a legit NFL back. He's got great vision. He's got great burst. He's got tremendous balance. He's one of, if not the best running back in all of college football, and he's number 3 on my Heisman list right now. And number 2, I've got Cam Ward from Miami. Cam was terrific during the first couple of games of the season. He's been everything Miami could have hoped for. This is what they paid for when they got Cam Ward. I know that there was some I wouldn't say controversy, but like there was a lot written about the way that Cam Ward went through the transfer portal and whether he was going to go to the NFL or come to college. Hey, Miami fans, aren't you happy he ended up a Hurricane? Because he's played phenomenal. 345 yards per game so far with 7 total touchdowns. And number one, the guy that we just saw, excuse me, I just hit the microphone, that we just saw on Saturday, Quinn Ewers from Texas. Total command of the offense. The plan on third down was tremendous, and then he executed it as well as you can possibly execute it. He was totally calm in the face of some pressure. I thought his ability to escape in the pocket and use his feet, that was what was really, really impressive. The throw that you're watching on YouTube that he kind of escapes up the middle and throws it to the tight end, that was tremendous. This throw right before the half where he's sprinting left and he throws what I call a Venus route. A Venus route looks like the single receiver or the outside receiver looks like he's running a fade and then drops out on a mini comeback to the front pylon. He threw that ball on a sprint left, which is really tough, folks, really tough. And he made it look incredibly easy. Quinn Ewers, 2 of his 3 touchdowns were on third down, where he was masterful in the game. Over 250 yards per game with 6 touchdowns on the season so far. And what I would categorize as one of the bigger wins going on the road and beating Michigan. Quinn Ewers, right now, my leading Heisman Trophy candidate through 2 weeks of the season. That'll do it for today's show. If you notice, I got this hat on right here, right? This is the hat that all of you that did 225 pounds 20 times on the bench press received from the Joel Klatt Show. Thank you for participating. Remember, all of you that sent those videos in, we sent you a hat. I hope you like it. This was custom. You can't get it anywhere. You can't buy it. You got the barbell bending over the JKS right there. And big thanks to Crafted for making these hats. And congratulations. I was thoroughly impressed with the number of people. I think we had, I believe it was 30 or 35. Does that sound right? I think it was 30 or 35, maybe more. We got a strong listener base. We got a very strong listener base. And remember, if you received one of those hats, did the challenge, and did 225 20 times, send us a picture or a video of you with your hat, and we'll send it up on those social channels. Remember to rate and review our show wherever you listen to podcasts. Please subscribe on the YouTube channel. Leave a comment below. I'll try to dive in and be in some of those comments as we go forward. And as always, tell a friend about our show, because college football is always better with a friend. Have a great day, everybody. We got picks coming up tomorrow.